When tempers explode on bar rescue, things get ugly fast. And mind you, these are the most brutal clashes ever caught on camera. We've all witnessed the chaos that Jon Taffer brings to bar rescue. Health hazards that make you question humanity, drinks so terrible they should come with a warning label, and confrontations that could scare a bouncer.
I'm the manager of this bar! How dare you disrespect that girl!
God.
But those are just appetizers compared to the main course, the epic blowouts that go down on this show. We're talking fights that make you wonder if you're watching a bar makeover or the latest pay-per-view brawl. These clashes go way beyond your average barroom bickering. You know, when someone tells you they bought a bar with their inheritance money, you kinda hope for a feel-good story, right? Maybe something that is now a beloved local spot where everyone knows your name. But when Jon Taffer walked into Russell City Grill and Sports Bar, it was more of a disaster where the bartenders are brawling and the owner is blissfully ignoring the chaos.
In the whole wide world, and I lost my mother, my whole world really crashed. I was really going through it.
Welcome to Hayward, California, where one man's dream of owning a bar has turned into a breeding ground for chaos, with bartenders running amok, customers driven away, and the owner oblivious to the disaster unfolding before him. Here's the lowdown. Russell City Grill was owned by Lee Bellett, a construction worker who decided to dabble in the bar business back in 2014. The guy had a good start, raking in $50,000 a month, and since there was no competition around, things looked pretty rosy, sweet. But, and this was a big but, Lee had zero experience running a bar, and it showed. The business went downhill faster than a greased pig on a slide. Lee wasn't just some random guy who decided to blow his savings on a bar, he used money inherited from his late mother to buy the place. Talk about pressure, right?
If I don't fix this business, this is it. I'm done. Oh my God.
The business was originally purchased by Bill Kladakis back in 2003 and later taken over by his son Manny and daughter Anna. Unfortunately, after Bill's passing in 2015, the bar faced a grim turn of events during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill.
You want to know why we didn't fix the floor?
Here, why haven't you fixed the floor?
The impact hit hard since the Bridge Lounge was a fisherman's bar, resulting in major financial losses and leaving the establishment in a state of disarray.
I think that's like pretty, seriously.
To assess the situation, Anna and her fiancé accompanied the renowned bar consultant Jon Taffer to take a good look at the troubled establishment.
She's worked up now. It's going to take a lot to slow her down.
As part of their investigative efforts, they even sent in a spy to gather valuable insights. Now, brace yourself for some drama. The spies had quite the unpleasant experience when they finally received their drinks.
Is it normally like this in here?
Yikes. Turns out, they used expired orange juice in their cocktails. You know, in one of the 4 biggest orange growing states in the country. As you do. But the drama didn't end there. Chrissy, another member of the Kladakis family, decided to confront Gary, the bar's manager, in a rather heated exchange.
It's a liability now. Are you insuring this
You want to see
place?
a liability? Here you go.
Their dispute revolved around a hazardous broken floorboard that posed a threat to the safety of the employees. Needless to say, tensions ran high during this intense argument.
That's not a liability.
Both of them just couldn't resist trying to get the last word, but neither was willing to let it slide. It was honestly pretty annoying to watch.
Go in front of your customers. And your brother isn't doing anything about it.
So, here's the deal. Manny hired his friend Gary to manage the bar. But Chrissy was convinced that Gary was taking advantage of their friendship to make some extra cash. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Gary didn't seem bothered by the fact that there was a loose floorboard, and Chrissy wasn't impressed with his attitude at all. Things escalated pretty quickly when Chrissy finally blew up at Gary, and they both ended up having a big argument about all the issues at the bar.
You destroyed the bar. It never came out of your pocket. My mom is struggling. You.
And get this, it all went down right in front of the customers who just wanted a nice drink.
Bitch.
You're an idiot, man. You can see what you want about me.
Talk about unprofessionalism. Needless to say, those customers were definitely shocked by the whole drama.
Is it normally like this in here?
This isn't a liability. I'm king off plywood.
As the argument continued to heat up, every person present there couldn't help but stare. I mean, it was an extremely uncomfortable situation. Since the tensions had escalated way too far, Manny seemed to be under a lot of stress. And to make things worse, guess what Chrissy did? This signaled to Taffer that it was time to intervene. Thankfully, the fight didn't go any further, and the situation was resolved without anyone's heads getting busted open. One would think he'd have taken extra care to keep things running smoothly, but nope. The bar staff had completely checked out, and walking into that place was like stepping into a circus where the clowns had taken over. There was no inventory, no tools, no management, just pure chaos. The staff? They weren't just unprofessional, they were downright reckless. These folks were so far gone they were taking shots with customers, playing dress up behind the bar, and doing everything but their jobs. That's some employee-customer relationships.
The bartenders are drinking more than the customers are.
And then there was Lee's buddy, Church. If the staff was bad, this guy was on another level. Church was that one friend everyone warned you about, but no one ever listened. He was the guy who thought it was totally okay to hop behind the bar and make his own drinks. He wasn't just a nuisance, he was a full-blown menace. And Lee? He just stood there letting it all happen, like a deer caught in headlights. Church's antics drove paying customers away, and it was no wonder who wanted to stick around when a fight could break out any minute. And oh, does a fight break out. One night, Church decided to get his hands dirty, literally, by jumping behind the bar to mix his own drink. El Boogie, one of the bartenders, wasn't having it. El Boogie might have been slacking on the job before, but this was the last straw.
Oh my god, Church, don't already start though.
He stepped in to stop the Church, and things went from zero to chaos in seconds. Glasses started shattering, equipment got tossed, and the whole place turned into a battleground. It was like the Wild West, but with less honor and more tequila.
Hey, whoa, hey, whoa.
This wasn't some bar fight fantasy, this was just straight up uncomfortable. And you know, it's bad when the police have to be called to break it up. Yeah, the police. The place was such a disaster that the only way to stop the madness was to get the law involved. If that doesn't scream, we need Jon Taffer. I don't know what does. Jon arrives with his usual flair, and he's got his expert bartender Lissa Marie Joyce and chef Aaron McCargo in tow. These two are the real deal, and they're about to see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. The recon reveals everything you'd expect, and worse, the place is a mess. The bartenders are unprofessional, and the kitchen is a health hazard. Sherry, the cook, is drowning in grease traps and raw chicken, while Lee is busy playing pool, oblivious to the chaos around him. Way to go, Lee! When Jon finally sits down with Lee, you can almost see the steam coming out of his ears. He's disappointed, and who wouldn't be? Lee has let his friends run the place into the ground, and the fight with Church was the cherry on top of this rotten cake. Jon doesn't mince words. Lee needs to get his act together, or this bar is toast. And this is where things start to get real. Jon forces Lee to face the harsh reality he's been taken advantage of, and it's time to make some tough decisions. Lee finally fires El Boogie and bans Church from the bar for good.
No more. And you get the out of here.
It's a move that's long overdue, but you can tell it's not easy for Lee. He's lost control of his bar, and now he's got to take it back, one painful step at a time. With this, Jon Taffer probably thought he'd seen every train wreck a bar could be. Grimy kitchens? Check. Disorganized owners? Double check. Staff who couldn't pour a drink if their lives depended on it? Oh, that's old news. But when he rolled up to O-Face Bar in Council Bluffs, it was a whole new level of chaos, the kind that makes you wonder how the doors stayed open for as long as they did.
To make matters worse, manager Amanda displays a total lack of professionalism.
Owned by Karen and Matthew Overmeyer, a married couple who seem more interested in orchestrating a circus than running a business, O-Face Bar was a disaster waiting to happen. They'd poured their retirement savings into the place, naming it after Matt's nickname, O-Face, a cheeky little nod that probably seemed clever after a few too many drinks. The locals loved it at first. The bar was raking in $15,000 a month, and Karen and Matt probably thought they were living the dream. But you know what they say, easy come, easy go, and boy, did it go. Success went straight to their heads, and the bar quickly spiraled into a chaotic, booze-fueled nightmare. Karen, the so-called manager, was drinking more than she was managing, while Matt partied like a college kid on spring break.
Here's getting lots of chips and seeing lots of tits. Let's get.
Their staff? Well, they weren't much better, turning the place into a free-for-all rather than a functioning business. By the time Jon Taffer stepped in, the bar was hemorrhaging $4,000 a month, drowning in a sea of $260,000 in debt, and the Overmeyers were just 3 months away from losing everything. Jon, never one to waste time, brought in his expert mixologist Russell Davis to help assess the situation, or should I say, get a whiff of it. From the outside, O-Face Bar looked more like a sad trailer park reject than a respectable drinking hole. And the inside? Even worse. Jon's first impression wasn't just bad, it was one of the worst he'd ever had, and that's saying something. It didn't take long to figure out that the bar was less about service and more about self-service. The staff was too busy partying in the back to bother with customers, and when they finally did serve a drink, it came in some nasty reused plastic container that looked like it had seen better days. A long time ago. The real kicker in this circus of a bar was the absolute lack of professionalism among the staff. Karen, the owner, seemed more invested in ringing a bell for free shots than noticing that her bartenders were either missing in action or, even worse, actively sabotaging the business. It was like she was the captain of a sinking ship, but too busy throwing a party to notice the water pouring in.
A lot of times, Karen, she'll want a drink, she'll sit there and ding, 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 ding.
Take Dave, for instance, one of the bartenders who decided to play with fire literally by serving flaming drinks all wrong. I mean, it's one thing to have flair, but it's another to turn the bar into a potential crime scene.
And I was like, oh!
And if that wasn't enough, another poor customer had to mix her own drink because, surprise, no one was around to do it for her. This place wasn't just a mess, it was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Things took a dramatic turn when a simple argument between Matt, bartender Sarissa, and manager Amanda escalated into a full-blown brawl. It kicked off when Matt, already on edge from who knows what, flat out refused to tell a customer how much alcohol was in a specialty shot. This ticked off Sarissa, who had just about enough of the lack of transparency and professionalism. She wasn't going to let this slide.
They want to know what's in the shop.
And then Amanda jumped in, and before anyone could say "oh face," fists were flying.
Fight. And they're really beating the hell out of each
It's
other.
a full-blown cat fight.
Now, let's pause for a second. Imagine being Jon Taffer sitting in your SUV, watching this mess unfold on the surveillance cameras. One minute you're mentally mapping out how to save this train wreck, and the next, you're racing out of the car to break up a catfight in the parking lot. Talk about hitting a new low. When Jon intervened, Amanda's attitude was anything but apologetic. She was defiant, disrespectful, and completely out of line, everything you don't want in a manager. Jon, being the no-nonsense guy he is, gave the Overmeyers an ultimatum. Fire Amanda or he'd walk away.
You're the manager of this bar. How dare you disrespect that girl?
Matt, who had clearly had enough of Amanda's antics, was all for it. But Karen, in a classic display of misplaced loyalty, wanted to keep her. So, in a move that defied all logic, they decided to fire Sarissa instead, the one person who had the guts to stand up for what was right. But Jon wasn't about to let them off that easily. The next day, when he walked into the bar and saw Amanda still there, he lost it. Jon's not a guy who likes to repeat himself, and seeing that the Overmeyers had ignored his clear directive pushed him over the edge. He walked out, leaving the staff scrambling to figure out what to do next. Realizing they had no other choice, they finally fired Amanda. But by this point, the damage was done. Jon returned, reluctantly, and the staff begged him for another chance. It was clear they needed his help, but Jon wasn't about to let them off the hook without some serious changes. And just when you thought things couldn't get more chaotic, Karen decided to stir the pot by accusing Matt of drinking on the job right in front of Jon. It was like watching two kids tattle on each other in the principal's office, except these kids were supposed to be running a business. Jon called Karen out on her behavior, labeling her as obnoxious, which she didn't take well. At this point, Jon had seen enough. The Overmeyers had crossed the line in more ways than one, and Jon wasn't about to put his reputation on the line for a bar that was beyond saving. And so, he walked out again, but this time for good, leaving the Overmeyers with a few choice words of advice: seek counseling. And just like that, Jon Taffer left O'Face Bar without a rescue and probably with a sense of relief that he didn't have to deal with that mess any longer. But don't think this is all buckle up for a bar rescue where all hell breaks loose in the most unexpected ways. Ever wondered what happens when a bar owner's last-ditch efforts to save his failing business spiral into chaos? Zanzibar's wild ride is about to hit a fever pitch. The owner goes from desperate to downright explosive, and it all culminates in a showdown that's anything but ordinary. When things get so out of control that fists start flying, including a jaw-dropping altercation with Jon Taffer himself, you know it's gonna be a ride you won't forget.
You said free sex to my wife.
Zanzibar was the brainchild of Ami Banari, a man who ran the place like a general, but with a heart that, in the beginning, seemed to be in the right spot. Ami wasn't just another bar owner trying to make it big, he was a guy who had seen some pretty serious stuff. After serving in the Israeli army, Ami packed his bags and headed for Denver, where he opened Zanzibar in 2009, ready to conquer the nightlife scene. At first, things were looking pretty good. The bar was raking in around $38,000 a month. Basically, it was the place to be. But then, life threw Ami a curveball. In 2011, a near-fatal car accident knocked him out of commission, and that's when the wheels started coming off. With Ami out of the picture, the staff went wild, turning Zanzibar into a mayhem. The customers got scared off, and the once thriving bar started spiraling. By the time Ami made his comeback, Zanzibar was bleeding cash, losing up to $3,000 every month. Ouch. So, what did Ami do? He decided to crack down on his staff with an iron fist, and oddly enough, started giving away free beer like he was channeling his inner Santa. As you might have guessed, this wasn't exactly a winning strategy. When Jon Taffer rolled up to the scene, it was obvious he was stepping into a war zone. The first sign of trouble? Ami standing outside hollering free beer to anyone who'd listen.
Come and get it! Free beer!
Now, let's be real, if the owner of a bar is out on the street handing out free dates like they're party favors, that's not exactly a good look. And yeah, Jon wasn't impressed either. Inside, the situation was spiraling into a frenzy. There was this drunken customer, already 3 sheets to the wind, hitting on a woman at the bar like he thought he was the king of charm. And what did the bartenders do? Oh, they just handed him another beer, because why not, right? Over-serving was practically the theme of the night, and not a soul in the place seemed to give a damn. Meanwhile, the kitchen was ground zero of chaos, cross-contamination running wild, with the cook coughing right into his gloves before diving back into the food prep. Disgusting doesn't even begin to describe it. And Jon finally had enough of this circus and stormed into the bar, determined to lay down the law. He wasted no time tearing into the staff for letting customers drink themselves into oblivion, to the point where they were practically crawling out the door. And that kitchen? Jon didn't even hesitate. He ordered every last thing to be thrown right in the bin. Amy, trying to act like he still had control of the situation, declared that his cook, Dave, wouldn't leave until the kitchen was spotless enough to eat off the floors.
Jon was right. Dave is not going home today.
But that's when things really started to get spicy. Ami was already on edge, throwing his weight around, but Jon wasn't backing down. When Jon called him out for offering free sex to customers because, you know, that's such a stellar business plan, the tension shot through the roof.
Hey, cheap sex!
Who's gonna give the free sex? Us. We're not giving free sex.
That was it, the last straw. Ami couldn't handle the pressure any longer, so he bolted to the back of the bar and started hurling glass plates against the wall like a total madman.
That's how I feel. One more?
We're not talking about a minor temper tantrum here. This was a full-scale meltdown, the kind where you realize the person's gone completely off the rails. Ami wasn't just angry, he was in total denial, refusing to hear a word from anyone or own up to the chaos he'd unleashed. And then came the big showdown, the kind of moment where you just know everything's about to go haywire. Jon was already on his last nerve with Amy's stubbornness, refusing to face the reality right in front of him. But Ami crossed the line and called Chef Duff fat boy. That was the moment when all bets were off.
It's a fat boy. Fat boy should have... Yes, fat boy. We should stop the kitchen long time ago.
Ami didn't just get mad, he went from 0 to full-blown aggressive in seconds. Next thing you know, he's shoving Jon and taking wild swings at him. Now, Jon Taffer is no pushover, and we all know he's not one to back down from a confrontation. But even Jon knows when to cut his losses and get out of dodge.
You disrespectful son of a bitch! Don't touch me!
After Ami's epic meltdown, Jon just told the staff goodnight and stormed out of the bar, probably thinking, if the rescue is even worth the headache. In the world of reality TV, these explosive moments are absolute gold. But in the real world, they're a glaring neon sign that things are seriously messed up. Ami's outburst wasn't just about the bar, it was about a guy who was way over his head, lashing out at anyone trying to help. And Jon saw that clear as day. Moving on to another crazy case on bar rescue. When the staff starts acting more like the customers, things go downhill fast. And let's just say, the chaos that erupts isn't your average bar drama. And so happened in the next bar. Tension boiled over and drinks kept flowing. The line between a fun night out and a total disaster got dangerously blurred. And trust me, what happens in the next bar Crossroads Grilly is nothing short of explosive. Robert and Ashley Gaddy started their bar with the best of intentions, family recipes, and a whole lot of heart, which is usually a pretty solid foundation for success. They had their community backing them up, and things looked promising. But after an injury sidelined Robert, the bar went downhill fast. That's when everything started spiraling, and fast. Before they knew it, they were drowning in a staggering debt. And let me tell you, it wasn't just the finances that were out of control, the staff was a whole other nonsense. Now, this is where things really start to get interesting. We've got a bar that's teetering on the edge of disaster, but what really sends it over the cliff is the fight that erupts one night. The tension was so thick, you could practically see it hanging in the air. The staff, who should have been holding it together, seemed more like a rowdy bunch of partygoers than professionals. With nicknames like Cheeks, Bubbles, and Buns, it's hard to believe they were ever serious about the job in the first place. I mean, who wouldn't want to party all night with a name like Buns?
There's Buns, the bartender. There's Bubbles.
These bartenders were mixing drinks in a way that would make even the most tolerant health inspector cringe. I'm talking about literally pouring alcohol from one bottle into another, which, fun fact, is totally illegal. If that's not enough, the drinks are so inconsistent that a margarita ordered by the recon team changed color like a chameleon. But let's talk about the real showstopper when Buns, who seemed to have forgotten that she's at work and not at a frat party, smacked a customer on the arm. Now, we all know that bars can get a little rowdy, but there's a line and Buns didn't just cross it, she then cha-chas her way on it. The first smack didn't seem to faze the customer too much, but when she went in for round 2, things started to heat up and what followed was crazy. The shouting match escalated into a full-blown confrontation with the other bartenders. The rest of the staff, already a few drinks deep, decide they're going to play peacemaker. But let's be real, it was like watching a bunch of tipsy toddlers trying to calm down a raging bull. Total chaos. Instead of diffusing the situation, they're just stumbling around, making everything 100 times worse. And just when you think this train wreck can't get any more out of control, they finally manage to drag Buns out of the bar, kicking and screaming like a banshee. I mean, it's a small miracle the walls were still standing after all this. Seriously, I half expected the place to implode right then and there.
What did they do right?
Now, you've got to wonder, where are the owners in all this mess? Oh, they're there all right, standing off to the side, looking like they just walked into a horror movie. Their dream bar? Yeah, it's officially gone from Cheers to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Robert, you don't hear all this and I'm yelling and they're not listening?
The moment Jon Taffer walked in, you could practically feel the collective relief. Finally, someone was there to take the reins. Jon didn't waste a second. He tore into the staff, spelling out exactly how their antics have driven this bar straight into the ground. And honestly, they had it coming. Every single word he throws at them is like a truth bomb, and boy do they need to hear it. The kicker? Jon reveals that the bar had lost $2,100 over one weekend from the staff drinking on the job. I mean, talk about shooting yourself in the foot. It's clear that the staff had zero respect for the business, and there was only one way to turn this place around, and Jon knew that was to make some serious changes. The next day, the reality of the situation sets in. The bar was a wreck, the kitchen was filthy, and the staff was still reeling from the previous night's drama. Jon stepped in and pointed out that the illegal practice of merging liquor bottles is just one of the many reasons the staff didn't respect the owners. But the drama wasn't over yet. Buns, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her, strolled into work like it's just another day. When she's called into the meeting with the owners, you could almost feel the tension in the air. She's fired on the spot, and honestly, it's a long time coming. This isn't the first time her drinking had caused problems, and the owners were finally doing what they should have done a long time ago, taking control.
Look at this.
First, Justin Whitfield, the owner. Now, Justin wasn't your typical bar owner, he's a former stripper and bodybuilder. Yep, you heard that right. He opened the End Zone back in 2005, and at first, things were going great. Locals loved the place, and it was pulling in a cool $100,000 a month. But as with all good things, the success started to fizzle out when the workload became too much for Justin to handle on his own. Enter Sean, Justin's buddy and partner in crime. Sean was also a former stripper and, for some extra spice, an MMA fighter. You'd think with that background, these two would be an unstoppable duo, right? Wrong. They couldn't see eye to eye on pretty much anything, and it didn't help that Justin had this brilliant idea of letting the bartenders drink behind the bar. Yeah, because nothing says professional like your staff downing shots while on the clock. Naturally, this led to a toxic environment where the staff was just as argumentative and divided as the owners. So, of course, the bar was in debt, and that's where Jon Taffer came in, ready to do what he does best, whip this place into shape. He rolled in with his expert team, Chef Vic Vegas and mixologist Kate Gerwin. They immediately saw potential. The bar was in a prime location, surrounded by 10 professional and college stadiums. But the exterior? Dead. The name? Not exactly screaming, "come in and have a great time." It just blended in with the surrounding mall, making it easy to miss. Jon's got a couple of spies to sample the service and see just how bad things really are. And boy, do they get an eyeful. The dynamic between Justin and Sean? Toxic, to say the least. Jon pointed out the ownership drama, with Justin's wife Dana and Sean's wife Stephanie also working at the bar, adding more fuel to the fire. Then there was Taylor, the bartender. The spies ordered some drinks from her, and they're so bad and sour that they had to reorder. Not a great start. They also ordered a pizza and burger, and that is where things really start to go downhill. Kevin, the cook, was working in a kitchen that looked like it hadn't seen a good cleaning in months. He was handling meat with his bare hands and cross-contaminating everything in sight. It's a health inspector's nightmare. Meanwhile, Kiana, another bartender, was throwing back drinks and cursing in front of customers like it's no big deal. The floor of the bar, sticky enough to trap a mouse. It's clear that basic hygiene wasn't a priority here. Then the food came out and Jon had to warn the spies not to eat it. That's how bad it is. But just when you think it can't get any worse, the male strippers took the stage. Yep, you read that right. Customers came in expecting a sports bar experience, and instead, they were treated to a strip show. And who do you think was leading the charge? None other than Justin, who decided to rip off his shirt and join in. You can almost hear the collective groan as customers start walking out in disgust. But here's where it gets real juicy. Taylor, who's loyal to Justin, started disrespecting Sean in front of everyone.
Told me she doesn't work for me, she works for Justin. That's what she just told me.
Sean's wife Stephanie wasn't having it, and before you know it, they were in a full-on physical fight. It's chaos.
Hey, you don't even know me, bitch. I don't care. I swear to God.
Sean got so upset he was literally in tears, and then came the insane outburst. He smashed the computer screen and started throwing things around.
It comes in here.
He's crying.
Wait, like he's the victim.
Finally, he confronted Justin, demanding that Taylor be fired, and things escalate quickly. The two owners were up in each other's faces, and it got physical. The staff has to step in to hold them back before it turns into an all-out brawl.
Side of me. Now you're gonna get it. Chill the out.
Jon, watching all of this unfold, decided to skip the meeting that night. Everyone was too riled up, and it was clear nothing productive will come out of it. The next day, Jon finally sat down with the crew. Most of the staff didn't bother enough to show up on time, and when they did, it's obvious the teams were divided. Everyone had a different version of what happened, and it's a mess. Now, here's where the ownership drama really heats up. Sean was given 15% of the business, but there's no paperwork to back it up. Justin thought he was protecting Sean from the debt, but Jon steps in and clears things up. Papers can be drafted to protect Sean, but this misunderstanding has been a ticking time bomb. Jon's experts laid out all the issues. Staff drinking on the job, health code violations all over the place, and strip shows that had no business being in a sports bar. They dug into the kitchen, finding fryer oil that looks like it's been there since the bar opened. Grease traps overflowing, and chicken wings soaking in blood. Over at the bar, there were fruit flies buzzing around, standing water, and a draft system that was dirtier than a gas station bathroom. The team starts cleaning, but of course, more drama flares up. Kevin wanted an apology from Sean before he even considered getting that contract signed. This conflict just kept dragging on, and as a result, the cleaning barely got done. When Jon and his experts returned, they were furious to find the place still filthy, and the staff still bickering about the contract. Finally, they got the bar somewhat cleaned up, and training began. Then came the stress test. Customers flooded in, and it was chaos from the start. The bartenders were slow, meats was burning in the kitchen, and tickets were piling up. Wait time stretched to 18 minutes, and when the food finally came out, it was a mess. Tables weren't labeled properly, and Kevin and Sean's lack of teamwork was painfully obvious. Jon had to shut down the stress test because, honestly, nothing improved. Afterwards, there was luckily some praise for Kevin and Sean's hard work in their respective areas, but the bartenders got a stern reminder to treat customers better. The next day, Jon watched as the ownership paperwork finally got sorted out, and Kevin and Sean buried the hatchet. But here's where things got interesting.
It's funny that you don't know how to make any of the drinks that you've been on your board for a year.
I know how to make
The
them.
storm had been brewing, and everyone in the Brixton had been feeling it. Jon Taffer, the master of bar rescues, had walked in, and nobody had been ready for the rage that was about to explode. It was about to get real ugly, real fast. In the wild world of bar rescue, the episode Tears for Beers stood out as one of the most intense and fiery moments ever caught on camera. Jon Taffer had seen it all, but nothing had pushed him over the edge quite like the mess he had walked into at the Brixton. This bar, smack dab in the middle of Austin, Texas, had been a complete disaster, and it was clear from the jump that things had been way out of control. The owners, instead of being the captains of their ship, had been letting it sink with no life rafts in sight. Taffer had been ready to tear into them, and boy did he ever.
Frat boys, tourists, college students.
What's up, dick?
I don't like.
The episode had started off with Taffer getting a first look at the Brixton, and right away, you could tell he had been pissed. The place had looked like a dive, and not in the cool, trendy way.
Destination from the outside to pull you in, but it doesn't. And then it's got a destination experience on the inside.
It had been run down, dirty, and just plain sad. Inside, things had been even worse. The bartenders had been more interested in chatting and messing around than actually doing their jobs.
He grabbed some Sindale lime juice and threw in there. This is the nastiest, sourest.
This is kind of gnarly, dude.
Ordered it.
There's no way to culture, because
The drinks had been sloppy, the service slow, and the whole vibe had been chaotic. Taffer had been watching all this go down from his command center, and you could practically see the steam coming out of his ears.
Look at this guy.
Chill out or get out. Your bar and act like a
From one is not a very nice guy. He insults customers who order premium, and then he screams at customers.
When Taffer had finally decided to make his entrance, it had been like watching a volcano erupt.
Belligerent owner, insulting his customers, it's all wrong. It's time for me to go in and do my work.
The tension in the bar had been off the charts. The staff had been goofing off 1 second, and the next, they had been standing there like deer caught in headlights as Taffer had stormed in. He hadn't wasted any time laying into them, pointing out every single thing they had been doing wrong. And trust me, there had been a lot. The owner, who had been supposed to be leading the team, had been nowhere to be found when the chaos had hit its peak. That had been the first red flag for Taffer, and he hadn't been shy about calling it out.
It's funny that you don't know how to make any of the drinks that you've been on your board for a year.
I know how to. You're bumming me out, man.
Good, I want to.
The bar was on the brink of collapse, not just because of poor management, but because of the toxic environment created by one particularly stubborn bartender who seemed hell-bent on resisting any kind of change. But that wasn't all. The bartender was in a constant state of conflict with his wife, and their relationship issues were bleeding into the business, making things 10 times worse. Can you believe that? This dude couldn't keep it together at home or at work, and it was driving everyone, especially Jon Taffer, up the wall.
So let's go sit down and talk. I want to get some history and what's going on here, okay?
When Taffer first arrived, he quickly picked up on the tension between the bartender and his wife. Their fights weren't just behind closed doors, they were out in the open for everyone to see. Customers, staff, and now Taffer all bore witness to their constant bickering. The guy was already under a lot of pressure from the failing bar, but instead of working with his wife to turn things around, he was butting heads with her at every turn. Can you believe that? They were supposed to be in this together, but all they did was tear each other apart.
You stand here and you pray every day. Somebody walks through the door and then you throw out half the people who come in.
As the episode unfolded, it became clear that the bartender's refusal to change wasn't just about the bar. His relationship with his wife was strained, and it was affecting everything. Every time she tried to suggest a way to improve the business, he would shoot her down, dismissing her ideas as if she didn't know what she was talking about. That is so unbelievable. How could he not see that his pride was not only destroying his marriage, but also the very business they were trying to save?
Stop talking to me.
Get out of the bar. You can't handle it.
Taffer was losing patience fast. He could see that the bartender's personal issues were directly impacting the bar's success, and it was driving him crazy. This wasn't just about a failing business anymore. It was about a man who was too stubborn to admit that he needed help from his wife, from his staff, and from Taffer. Can you believe that? This guy's ego was so huge that he couldn't even listen to the one person who was supposed to be his partner in life and in business. That's just insane.
Well, I've got a couple customers that weren't happy with their drinks. Set them, got them the next round. I know they didn't buy them.
He was so caught up in his own frustration that he refused to listen to reason. Every time his wife tried to speak, he interrupted her, shutting her down before she could even get her thoughts out. Can you believe that? He was so wrapped up in his own anger that he couldn't even see that his wife was just trying to help. That is so unbelievable.
It was a prime example of why people don't want to go back to the Brixton.
It's behind the bar, the bartending.
The tension continued to build, and Taffer's anger was bubbling over. He could see the potential for the Brixton, but he knew that as long as the bartender kept fighting with his wife, nothing was going to change. The guy's stubbornness was like a brick wall, blocking any progress that could be made. Taffer was practically pacing, trying to keep his cool, but it was clear that he was ready to explode. You should see what happens next when Taffer finally hits his breaking point.
Hey guys.
Hello.
The breaking point came when Taffer started talking about rebranding the bar. He knew that the Brixton needed a fresh start, a new name, and a new identity. But the bartender, true to form, resisted. He clung to the bar's name like it was the only thing holding his world together, refusing to even consider Taffer's advice. Can you believe that? He was willing to let the bar sink just to hold on to a name that clearly wasn't working anymore. That is so unbelievable.
That's a liability. When they tell me that they can't get good drinks, and also that a husband...
Wait until you see what he did next. Can you freaking believe that? And it wasn't just the name that was the issue. Taffer brought in experts to help train the staff and elevate the bar's offerings, but the bartender's resistance continued. He scoffed at the idea of learning new skills, acting like he already knew everything there was to know about running a bar. Can you believe that this guy was so arrogant that he thought he didn't need to learn anything new? That's just insane. You should see what happens next when Taffer realizes that this guy is not just resistant, he's actively sabotaging the entire rescue effort.
Is in my life, but he's about as hard-headed and opinionated as it gets.
It's not fair to us.
It's not what I want, it's what you want.
As Taffer continued to try and get through to the bartender, it became clear that the guy's relationship with his wife was a major roadblock. Every time she tried to step in and support Taffer's suggestions, the bartender would snap at her, shutting her down and refusing to listen. Can you believe that? It was like he couldn't stand the idea of his wife being right about anything, even if it meant saving their business. That is so unbelievable.
Share it as best you can, also make it in a cold class.
Exactly.
The episode Tears for Beers stands out as one of the angriest moments in bar rescue history. Jon Taffer had been pushed to the brink by a bartender who was too stubborn to see that his refusal to adapt was killing the bar and his marriage. Can you believe that this guy almost tanked the whole rescue just because he didn't want to learn and couldn't stop fighting with his wife? In the end, the confrontation left a lasting impression. The Brixton was on the verge of collapse, and it had taken every ounce of Taffer's patience and fury to steer it back on course. Can you believe how close they came to losing everything? That is so unbelievable. Tears for Beers will forever be remembered as one of the most intense, dramatic, and downright furious episodes in the entire series.
I'm watching you hit on my wife and disrespect her. Is that the way our relationship? Your damn bar. Cole, let's go.
But nobody expected things to spiral down in this next episode. Jon Taffer, usually the one dishing out the fury, had been ready to explode like never before. But the moment his wife had gotten involved, it had been game over for the Sand Dollar. When it came to intense moments on bar rescue, the episode titled Don't Mess with Taffer's Wife had been one for the record books. The bar in question was the Sand Dollar in Las Vegas, and the owners had been messing up big time. But what had really sent Jon Taffer into a fit of rage wasn't just the poor management or the failing business, it had been something much more personal. Taffer had shown up at the Sand Dollar ready to do what he did best, save a bar from the brink of disaster. But things had taken a turn that nobody had seen coming. It all started when Jon had brought his wife, Nicole, into the bar to see what the vibe had been like from a customer's perspective.
It's here. So I asked my wife, Nicole, to come in and do the recon. She is a local.
This had been a usual part of Taffer's process, using her as his secret weapon to get an honest view of what was really going on. But what had happened next had taken things to a whole new level. As Nicole had been sitting at the bar trying to order a drink, the staff had been completely ignoring her. And it hadn't just been the typical bad service, these bartenders had been flat out rude.
Someone drink?
Maybe I'll have a screwdriver.
They had been too busy chatting amongst themselves, treating her like she wasn't even there. Nicole, being the classy lady she was, had kept her cool, but you could tell she hadn't been impressed.
The cups. That's what we serve out of. You wanted a what again?
Oh, a screwdriver. They don't even know.
Meanwhile, Jon had been watching all this go down, and you could see the anger bubbling up inside him. He had been keeping it together, but just barely.
Like my wife would want to sleep with that idiot.
The tipping point had come when one of the bartenders had finally decided to acknowledge Nicole, but instead of taking her order, he had been acting like she was bothering him. Nicole, with her expertise and experience in the bar industry, was helping to evaluate the staff and identify the core problems. But one of the bar's employees decided he wasn't going to show her any respect. Can you believe that? This guy wasn't just ignoring her advice, he was straight up dismissive and rude, like she didn't know what she was talking about. That is so unbelievable. As Taffer watched from the sidelines, you could see the tension building. Nicole was trying to give the guy some pointers, simple advice on how to improve his performance and make the bar better. But instead of listening, he was brushing her off, rolling his eyes, and even laughing at her suggestions. Can you believe that kind of attitude? It was clear that he didn't take her seriously, and Taffer was starting to simmer. You should see what happens next when Taffer realizes just how far this guy is willing to push.
Oh, wow. Are you kidding me?
No, trying to pull the train.
The disrespect had been unreal, and that had been the moment when Jon Taffer had decided he had had enough.
No.
Oh, wait a second.
Oh.
He had stormed into the bar, and the look on his face had been enough to make everyone freeze in their tracks. You could practically feel the temperature drop as Taffer's fury had filled the room. Taffer wasn't having any of it. He laid into the guy with the kind of fury that only comes from a deep, personal offense. He made it crystal clear that Nicole wasn't just some consultant, she was his wife, and she deserved respect. Can you believe how intense it got? Taffer's voice echoed through the bar as he tore into the guy, telling him that if he couldn't treat people with respect, he didn't belong in the business.
Is that the way our relationship is going to start? You're hitting on my wife!
You should see what happens next when Taffer finally confronts the employee. When Taffer walked into the bar, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone could feel that something was about to go down. Taffer called the guy out in front of the entire staff, demanding to know why he thought it was okay to treat Nicole the way he did. Can you believe the look on that guy's face? He was clearly caught off guard, but instead of apologizing, he tried to defend himself, which only made things worse. That's just crazy.
On your wife. If I were hitting on your wife, we'd already be out of here.
This wasn't just some random bar consultant getting ignored, this was his wife, his partner, being treated like she didn't matter. Can you believe that someone would be so stupid as to disrespect Jon Taffer's wife? That's just insane. The owner of the Sand Dollar, who had been oblivious to what had just happened, had walked right into the line of fire. Taffer had been livid, and he hadn't wasted any time letting the owner know exactly how badly he had been screwing up. He had laid into him about the awful service, the lazy staff, and, most importantly, the complete lack of respect they had shown to his wife.
Really?
Yeah.
I got your frickin' gun. I know exactly what you're up to.
The employee tried to backtrack, mumbling some half-hearted excuses, but Taffer wasn't interested in hearing them. He was done with the guy's attitude, done with his disrespect, and he wasn't going to let it slide. Can you believe that someone could be so stupid as to mess with Taffer's wife? That is so unbelievable. Taffer made it clear that there was no room for people like him in any bar he was trying to save.
And honestly, I don't know if I want to rescue your damn bar.
In the end, the employee had no choice but to apologize. But the damage was done. Taffer's fury had left a lasting impression on everyone in that bar, and it was clear that things would never be the same. Can you believe how close this guy came to losing everything just because he couldn't show a little respect? That's just insane. The episode Don't Mess with Taffer's Wife stands out as one of the angriest moments in bar rescue history. Jon Taffer was pushed to his limits when a bar owner disrespected his wife, igniting a fierce confrontation. In the end, Taffer made it clear that he fiercely protects his family, leaving a lasting lesson for the offender. But in this next episode, the energy in the underground Wonder Bar had been chaotic since the start. But nobody was prepared for what was coming next. Jon Taffer had been pushed to his breaking point, and this time, there was no holding back. In the world of bar rescue, the episode Crayons and Anger Lines had quickly become notorious for being one of the angriest and most chaotic episodes in the show's history. The underground Wonder Bar, located in the heart of Chicago, had been on its last leg when Jon Taffer had arrived to save the day. Jon Taffer was sitting in his car just outside the underground Wonder Bar in Chicago, surveilling the scene before making his entrance. This was standard procedure for him, a way to get an unfiltered look at how the bar was being run when the staff had no idea he was watching. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to see. Can you believe that this bar was supposed to be a serious business? What he noticed next was enough to make him see red.
Bar. This is the River North District, the hip area of Chicago. When you open a bar...
As Jon Taffer was sitting in his car, scoping out the underground Wonder Bar from the outside, something shocking caught his eye. The walls of the bar's exterior were covered in crayon scribbles. Can you believe that? The outside of a bar, meant to draw in customers, looked like it had been attacked by a group of kids with a box of crayons. That is so unbelievable. The sight of those scribbled walls immediately set off alarm bells for Taffer, and he knew right then that this rescue was going to be a battle.
This wall is like a giant kindergarten.
As Taffer observed the bar through the surveillance camera, something immediately caught his eye: crayons. Yes, you read that right. Crayons were scattered across the tables as if this was some kind of children's play area instead of a bar. Can you believe that? A grown-up bar with crayons just sitting there like they were running a daycare instead of a place where adults could unwind with a drink. That is so unbelievable. Taffer's jaw clenched as he realized just how off course this place had gone.
The action live.
Crayons, placemats.
As Jon Taffer sat back, observing the chaotic mess that was the underground Wonder Bar, he couldn't believe his eyes when the owner, instead of dealing with the massive debt hanging over her bar, carelessly abandoned her responsibilities and made her way to the stage. Can you believe that? With her bar sinking under a mountain of debt, she just up and left the bar to fend for itself while she started performing her bizarre antics on stage. That is so unbelievable. She was singing and completely losing herself in a world of strange theatrics while her business was crumbling.
So she gets on stage playing music every night.
The customers were just as baffled as Taffer, watching in shock as the owner prioritized her weird performance over the survival of her bar. It was like she didn't even care that her livelihood was on the line.
I would knock myself up on that stage if
The underground Wonder Bar was a complete disaster, disorganized to the point where it felt more like a chaotic playground than a functioning bar. Crayons were scattered everywhere, the walls were covered in childish scribbles, and there was zero sense of professionalism. But what really set Jon Taffer off was the owner's ridiculous antics on stage. While the bar was drowning in debt and disorder, she was up there performing her strange routine, completely ignoring the mess her business was in. Can you believe that? Taffer's anger was boiling over as he watched her act like nothing was wrong. It was the last straw. He knew he had to step in and take control before things got any worse. You should see what happens next when Taffer decides he's had enough and storms into the bar, ready to lay down the law.
Her delusion ends right now. I'm going in, guys.
The owner, a free-spirited musician, had seemed more interested in keeping the creative atmosphere alive than actually running a successful bar. Taffer had been watching all of this with his usual intense gaze, and you could tell right away that things were about to get heated. The underground Wonder Bar had been a mess from the moment Taffer had stepped foot inside. The bar had had this weird artsy vibe, but instead of being cool, it had just been confusing and disorganized. When Taffer had made his grand entrance, the place had been buzzing with a strange mix of tension and indifference. The staff, who had been used to the bar's laid-back, anything-goes attitude, had been caught off guard by Taffer's no-nonsense approach. He had walked in like a storm, and within seconds, he had been tearing into the owner for allowing the place to fall into such disarray. The crayons on the tables, the mismatched decor, the lack of any clear direction, it had all been driving Taffer up the wall. As Jon Taffer and the lady owner finally took a seat at a table inside the underground Wonder Bar, Taffer was stunned by what he saw right in front of him. The table wasn't just messy, it was littered with crayons and scribbles, as if it belonged in an art class instead of a bar. Can you believe that?
Or you wouldn't be here.
Crayons. Do you have a lot of children?
In the middle of a serious conversation about saving her failing business, the owner casually picked up a crayon and started doodling on the table, as if the gravity of the situation hadn't even registered with her. That is so unbelievable.
What are you gonna do when this bar closes? You gonna draw hearts?
Taffer's eyes narrowed as she rambled on, talking in circles, her words making less and less sense. It was clear that she was completely disconnected from the reality of her crumbling bar. With every careless scribble she made, Taffer's patience wore thinner.
My music.
I'm here to make you money. Do you understand?
Christ.
You want to doodle?
This wasn't just weird, it was infuriating. How could she not see the disaster she was sitting in? The moment she started doodling, it was like she was drawing out Taffer's anger and he was done playing games. You should see what happens next when Taffer decides enough is enough and lets her know exactly what he thinks about her bizarre behavior.
And I am telling you, either pick a dream or pick your meat, because you're not gonna have...
What followed was one of the most intense confrontations in bar rescue history. Taffer, who had already been pushed to his limit by the disorganization and the owner's antics, exploded. He didn't just see a bar in trouble, he saw a bar owner who was completely out of touch with reality, more interested in her crayons and doodles than in saving her business. Can you believe that? Taffer laid into her with a fury that was impossible to ignore, his voice booming as he called her out for treating the situation like a joke. That is so crazy. He made it crystal clear that her weird behavior wasn't just inappropriate, it was the very reason her bar was failing. The owner was left stunned, facing the harsh truth that Taffer was delivering with all the force he could muster.
I don't trust you at all.
As the episode reached its critical turning point, Jon Taffer, having seen enough of the chaos and disorganization, laid out his plan to save the underground Wonder Bar. The bar needed a complete overhaul inside and out. Taffer made it clear that her antics and absent-minded behavior were a huge part of why the bar was failing, and if she didn't let go of control, all his efforts would be for nothing. But Lonnie, stubborn as ever, wasn't ready to listen, and even with the weight of her bar's future hanging in the balance, she continued to act as if everything was fine. She wandered around the bar, lost in her own world, completely disconnected from the urgency of the situation.
We've been waiting 30 minutes for our drinks. We haven't got them yet, so go to the bar next door.
Can you believe that? Instead of Lee staying out of the way, Lonnie continued her strange behavior, oblivious to the work that needed to be done around her. That is so crazy. It was like she was in a dream, while everyone else was struggling to turn her bar around. At one point, in a moment that perfectly captured just how out of touch she was, Lonnie even broke a glass of drink. Can you believe that? While her bar was being transformed and her employees were working hard to save their jobs, Lonnie was too distracted by her own antics to even handle a simple drink. That is so unbelievable. The glass shattered on the floor, and instead of jumping in to clean it up or apologize, she just continued to float through the bar as if nothing had happened. It was as if she was completely detached from the reality of the situation.
We do 365.
Lonnie?
Meanwhile, the rest of the bar workers were scrambling, trying to keep up with the changes and desperately needing Lonnie's leadership, which was nowhere to be found. Can you believe that she was just ignoring them like that?
You can call Lonnie. I've been playing for 40 years.
Hey, Mom!
That is so crazy. Taffer watched in frustration as Lonnie's absent-minded behavior continued to undermine the entire rescue effort. The contrast between her bizarre antics and the seriousness of the situation couldn't have been more stark. Despite Jon Taffer and his team's relentless efforts to help and transform the underground Wonder Bar, Lonnie remained stubbornly disrespectful. No matter how many times they offered guidance and support, she continued to dismiss their advice and act as if nothing mattered. Can you believe that?
Lonnie can't run this bar. She's not a bar manager. She's walking around, doesn't care about...
Her constant disregard for their expertise and her refusal to change made it clear that no progress could be made. You should see what happens next when Taffer finally reaches his breaking point, realizing that if Lonnie doesn't snap out of it, there might not be a bar left to save.
We're gonna be closing it down. Sorry for the service, but we gotta do what we gotta do.
In Crayons and Anger Lines, Jon Taffer faced an unparalleled challenge as the Underground Wonder Bar's owner stubbornly ignored the chaos around her. Can you believe that? Despite Taffer's efforts and plans for a major overhaul, her bizarre behavior and blatant disrespect pushed him to his breaking point. That is so unbelievable.